You're born an outcast in the unforgiving, literally freezing steppes of 12th century Siberia. You've been totally abandoned by your own people and left out there to starve. Now, for most people, the story would end right there, right? But the story we're diving into in today's explainer is about a boy who survived that exact brutal fate to eventually become the King of Kings. We're of course talking about Genghis Khan. To some, he was nothing but a bloodthirsty barbarian, and to others, a brilliant unifier. But one thing is absolutely undeniable. He was the founder of the largest connected land empire the world has ever seen. To really grasp this, we have to look at the sheer, staggering scale of his ambition, because it honestly defies belief. Think about the Roman Empire for a second. We usually hold Rome up as the absolute pinnacle of ancient military conquest, right? And it took them roughly 400 grueling years to reach their peak size. Yet Genghis Khan, working alongside his sons and grandsons, matched and actually surpassed that exact same territorial acquisition in just 25 years. 25 years. It's an almost incomprehensible speed of expansion. They went to war on a scale the world had literally never witnessed before, completely rewriting the map of the globe in a single generation. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Early Life and Survival. If you look at this timeline, you'll see that tragedy defined his entire worldview right from the start. He was born in 1162 with the name Temüjin. He was the son of a local chieftain, but any comfort or privilege that brought was completely shattered when he was just 9 years old. His father was actually poisoned by a rival tribe. And because Mongol tribes back then only followed strong, proven leaders, the tribe just abandoned Temüjin and his family, leaving them to survive the harsh steppes completely alone. Hunger was a constant, deadly threat for them. In fact, the starvation got so severe that Temüjin actually killed his own half-brother, who he accused of hoarding food while the rest of the family starved. It's a brutal, dark act, but it allowed Temüjin to gain control over his tiny, fractured family, his very first step into leadership. There's also this wild legend surrounding his arrival into the world. It was said that he was born clutching a blood clot in his fist. Now, in the deeply spiritual context of the Mongol tribes at the time, this visceral, bloody detail wasn't just a coincidence. It was interpreted as a direct sign from heaven. They saw it as a prophecy that this boy was destined to become a great warrior. Moving on to Section 2, the rise to power. Temüjin understood pretty early on that his small clan, exposed out in the open grasslands, was deeply vulnerable. So to bolster his numbers, he married a woman named Borte, which secured him not just a companion, but a vital fighting force. But as you might expect, the peace didn't last. The powerful Merkit tribe raided his camp and kidnapped his new wife. This forced Temüjin to flee and basically beg for help from a local Khan who had once fought alongside his father. Well, the Khan agreed. And at the head of a now massive fighting force, Temüjin marched up into the mountains of northern Mongolia, completely slaughtered the offending tribe, and took Borte back. This was a massive turning point. It taught him the absolute necessity of forging strong military alliances and the devastating power of total retaliation. But as his following grew, a huge ideological rift actually tore his people apart. See, Temüjin, having survived at the literal bottom of society, believed in an absolute meritocracy. He valued talent and ability above all else, totally regardless of where a person came from. On the flip side was his childhood blood brother and co-leader, Genghis. Genghis held the much more traditional aristocratic belief that only those of noble birth deserved respect and power. This fundamental difference of opinion ended up splitting the tribe right down the middle, turning these lifelong friends into fierce, bitter rivals. Which brings us to Section 3, Major Turning Points. 2 years after their big split, Genghis ambushed Temüjin's unprepared and outnumbered forces, inflicting a crushing defeat. But this wasn't just a military loss, it was straight-up psychological terror. The generals that Genghis captured were subjected to a horrific execution. They were boiled alive. When Temüjin learned of this gruesome fate, he was enraged. He made a vow right then and there that he would seek absolute revenge, and perhaps more importantly, that he would never be defeated again. And in the decisive battle of 1204, Temüjin actually kept that vow, displaying a military genius that completely dismantled his enemy. Let's break down how he did it. First up, deception. On the eve of battle, he ordered every single warrior to light 5 fires. This completely tricked Genghis' scouts into reporting an impossibly massive army, striking fear into their hearts before a single sword was even swung. Second, as dawn broke, his men unleashed a massive barrage of arrows. Using bows made of wood and animal bone, they could hit targets from an astonishing 500 yards away. Third, he sent in these devastating, rapid cavalry charges. And finally, the trap. He feigned a retreat, basically luring Jamuka's forces right into a carefully planned ambush where they were utterly demolished. Jamuka fled, was later betrayed by his own men, and executed. Temüjin had won. So, with his rivals defeated, the tribes of the steppes were finally unified under one single commander for the very first time. To honor this monumental achievement, in the year 1206, Temüjin was granted a brand new title, Genghis Khan, which translates to Universal Leader. Let's look at Section 4, Peak Empire and Achievements. Now firmly in power, Genghis Khan turned his attention east toward the incredibly wealthy and advanced Chinese dynasties. He knew for a fact they'd never tolerate a unified Mongolia right on their doorstep, so he decided to strike first. His forces carved a path of destruction all the way to Zhongdu, which is modern-day Beijing. But they ran into a massive problem. The Mongols were nomads, and Beijing was protected by these alien 40-foot-high walls. I mean, how do you beat a wall you literally can't climb? Well, you use your enemies. Genghis captured Chinese engineers to design advanced siege equipment for him, and then he simply camped outside, cutting off all vital supply lines. The deliberate starvation warfare was so intense that thousands of citizens starved, with many reportedly turning to cannibalism. When the Mongols finally breached the city, the resistance was completely broken, resulting in a month of brutal plunder. That relentless, almost terrifying drive fueled an expansion that didn't just stop with China. His armies pushed continuously west, reaching all the way into Eastern Europe. By the time of his death in 1227, they had secured an unbelievable 10 million square miles of territory. Just to put that massive number into perspective, that is the entire size of the African continent. It's actually larger than the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean islands combined. It's a landmass that completely dwarfed modern continents, firmly cementing him as one of history's most successful military commanders. Finally, Section 5, a complicated global legacy. Get this, his legacy remains astonishingly personal for a lot of people today. As a conqueror, Genghis Khan took women as prizes from essentially every single region he subjugated, which resulted in an enormous number of children. Recent genetic studies actually suggest that roughly 1 in every 200 people living today are directly descended from him. No way, right? But it's true. His bloodline is woven permanently into the fabric of the modern global population. And this brings us to the ultimate historical paradox of Genghis Khan. On one hand, he was an undeniably brutal conqueror. He was responsible for mass slaughter, endless plunder, and terrifying starvation warfare. But on the exact same timeline, he was surprisingly a progressive visionary. He created a society that totally disregarded race and ethnicity, relying strictly on an absolute meritocracy. He practiced widespread religious tolerance, making his empire one of the most diverse in history. He established uniform laws across his territories and explicitly forbade the enslavement of any Mongol, solidifying equality for his citizens. It's kind of crazy to think about, but his ruthless pacification of the land actually gave birth to unprecedented global connection. He offered state protection for merchants, totally reviving the legendary Silk Road. It was said that a man could walk from one end of the empire to the other with a solid gold plate on his head and never once be attacked. This hyper-secure trade route allowed revolutionary Chinese technologies, things like paper, gunpowder, and the compass, to flow directly into the West. And this sudden surge of culture and technology played a massive role in igniting the European Renaissance just a few generations later. In 1227, during his final conquest into China, the Grey Khan's life finally came to an end. According to the secret history of the Mongols, his poignant final words to his sons were, "I have conquered for you a large empire, but my life was too short to take the whole world. That I leave to you." He appointed his son Ojade as his successor to continue the mission. And true to the absolute secrecy of his origins, Genghis Khan was buried in an unmarked grave. In fact, the entire funeral party was reportedly executed just to keep the location permanently hidden from the world. Which leaves us with a really lingering modern paradox. When you look at the brutality, the genocide, the innovation, and the unprecedented global trade, was Genghis Khan merely a bloodthirsty barbarian who ravaged the earth, or was he the ruthless architect of modern global connection, paving the way for the world we live in today? It's a debate that historians still wrestle with, and a legacy whose repercussions are very much alive right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.